there's a video idea that you had for a while. We finally have the opportunity to talk about it. Yep. It is talking vintage camera bodies,
yes,
specifically film bodies,
yep,
in the Leica space.
For sure.
Now, the premise here is that I asked you, hey, why don't you bring 2 or 3 of your favorite Leica film bodies.
Yep.
Give us some context, give us some history, tell us what you like about them, what people might appreciate, and almost treat this like a buying guide in a way, where people might want to start their conversation, right?
Definitely.
So let's jump right in. What is the first Leica film body you want to talk about?
So it's my personal favorite Leica, my personal favorite camera of all time. It's the M3 here. And the reason why I love the M3 so much, it's not because it's the first M ever. I mean, I think that's amazing. And 70 years later, we still have M's, but it's actually the viewfinder. So the M3 has the highest magnification viewfinder of any M to this day ever made.
And what is that magnification?
So it's 0.91. Which
okay.
we're generally around 0.72 right now.
Why don't we get B cam right over my shoulder? I don't think people are going to mind this too much. Why don't you get over my shoulder so we have a second angle? You can just peep over here. And you're telling me this is 0.91.
Yes.
And most cameras from Leica are...
I mean, generally 0.72, but you'll see some 0.85, some 0.58s different. But 0.72 is going to be your most standard, probably 90% of them.
And for the people that have no idea what these numbers mean, what does that mean?
That means this is the world's greatest rangefinder for shooting on a 50mm lens.
Gotcha.
And if you want to shoot wider than that, it is not great. But for me, 50mm and M go hand in hand. So what
it basically means that those 50mm frame lens are going to be bigger.
Yes, it fills the frame. It makes it much easier to focus, especially if you throw like even like a Noctilux, like a new lens on this. The frame lines are very bright, very large, and that center patch where you're focusing is magnified more. So it really is just, I mean, you have to look through it to understand, but it is a dream to look through, especially with the 50.
I mean, you're telling me this. I'm obviously going to have to look through it. Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, even compared to, like, your brand new M11, like, this is going to be better for a 50.
This viewfinder, right, this rangefinder should say, and looking through, like, the frame lines almost feel like a 28 would feel, like, pretty close to a 28 would feel on a modern Leica body, right?
It's interesting.
All right, so that's a great feature about this.
I also love the cosmetics. I mean, the M3 has these raised windows. I mean, this was built at a time when craftsmanship, especially in Germany at this time, craftsmanship, elegant, like this was like as good as it can get as far as manufacturing techniques. So in my opinion, this is one of the best built M's, if not the best. And I love the cosmetics of these raised windows. It has this kind of the window here for your frame counting, which we still see in an MP today. I think it's the most beautiful camera of all time. It's incredible.
Now we're here in the Lower East Side of New York, so you're gonna hear some sirens, you're gonna hear some people.
Streets, some honking, some
sirens. We're not editing any of that stuff out, all right? It's like you're in the room with us. So what's unique about this is that it's also a black paint edition. Yeah,
so this one specifically is a little more special. The M3, I believe, is the most produced M of all time as well. They made over around 250,000, so 250,000 of them. About 1,300 only were made in black paint. Typically sold to professional photographers, so they're incredibly rare and valuable, although they take no different picture than your silver one.
Gotcha. What are some other things to consider with an M3 that might be unique to the M3 or introduced with the M3?
Yep, so there's one big thing that you'll see varying in M3s. Around the serial number 1 million, which is not what they produce, but it's just how the serial numbers work, around over 1 million or above, you'll have what's called a single stroke, which is what this camera is. It's what we know about all our film cameras. One advancement of the lever, advances you 1 frame. Now, just like that. Now, what's interesting is the earlier M3s had what's called a double stroke mechanism, where you actually went about like a half and then you retract and you finish the stroke. So it's like a double, you kind of go here and then you go all the way to finish it. So a double stroke is kind of an interesting feature that you look for. Now, I don't know exactly why. I mean, there's varying rumors that some people say that they thought too much static electricity would build up, so that's why they did the double stroke. Some thought that the film emulsion was too delicate at the time, so the double stroke was more gentle on it. I don't know, if both or which one of those is true, but it doesn't change the function of the camera. Although I'll say, if you're used to a single stroke, it definitely can get a little weird because you'll cock and then why isn't it firing? Why isn't it firing? And then you're like, okay, and then you finish it. So I love the double stroke. It's unique. It's just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then also those M3s at that time, the strap lugs Generally, the very early M3 strap lugs will have what we call like a long lug. I just think they're elegant and beautiful. They're a little more robust, but doesn't really, again, change function at all. It's just little cosmetic things. But the double stroke is the main thing that's different in the M3 and different than any other M. No other M or no other Leica, I don't think, has a double stroke mechanism.
And obviously, at this time, no built-in light meter, so there's no way to actually get any guidance on exposure. But it is a tried and tested film camera that if you find one in good condition, you can use it for a really, really long time.
And something with all these cameras, believe it or not, the more used a camera is, as long as it's been relatively serviced here and there, actually, generally, the better the older cameras will work. And the reason is the older lubricants will dry up and solidify inside the cameras. So, I mean, any of our mechanical cameras, especially film cameras, the worst thing you can do is let it sit on a shelf for years at a time. You know, at minimum, even with no film in it, just cycle through the camera, shoot a couple of frames, keep all the gears and mechanics moving inside of it, because these are, incredibly complex mechanical devices.
Cool. So we talked about the first camera. Let's move on to your second favorite film body.
Yeah, so this is the M2, which came after the M3, believe it or not.
You're telling me they went from 3 to 2?
Yes.
Okay.
And then to 4 after this. But so the M2 was designed to be a more economical camera, a more inexpensive version of the M3. And there's a few features on it that have changed. Now, what we'll notice on the top here is it has this. The M3 has this beautiful window, which is a harder, it's a much more difficult thing, much more expensive to make. And the thing is, when you pull the film, not the canister out, it will actually reset your frame counter like a modern MP. Well, on the M2, you have this actual physical thing that you have to reset manually. So it's a manually resetting film counter. So this is telling you what frame you're on. Now, the interesting thing about that is that Leica made a camera called the MP, which we think a modern MP. No, the modern MP was designed after an original one. Now that's a very holy grail. It's one of the most rare and expensive cameras. They actually took the M2 style, cheaper, advanced or film counting, and the reason is they said that in war it would be more resistant to bomb blasts. They were worried that the glass window would shatter. So it's not necessarily better or worse, but I think the German engineers at the time would be more prideful in the window and the mechanism it takes to make that work. But durability-wise, the M2 is actually regarded as being a little more durable because you don't have to worry about that window breaking.
Gotcha. And now there's something here. This is not a button or anything.
No, so this is how you set your counter. So if you see, there's a little arrow next to it.
Okay.
So the arrows work. So once you put new film in, you advance a few times, and then you set it to 0.
Got it.
And then it counts. Now, the other big difference over the M3 is the viewfinder magnification has changed, and now we can go up to 35 millimeter lenses on this.
Got it.
So the viewfinder is a little less magnification, but therefore it allows us to use 35 millimeter lenses without an external viewfinder.
Interesting. So you have something that is designed to be a little bit more resilient, especially during conflict and periods of a lot of reportage going on, and then you have a viewfinder that's also changing to maybe change with where storytelling is going to wider perspectives to get more of the scene, a 35 versus a 50, where people want to capture more of what's happening around them. It's fascinating. What else about this camera, makes it unique?
Yeah, so one other big feature is this camera, along with the original MP, have a system that would accept what's called a Leica rapid winder. I didn't bring one here today, but, and also, luckily now we actually have some knockoff, or whatever you want to say, reproduction from other companies in Korea and a few other places that make them. The reason why I say luckily, if you want an original Leica, it's about $30,000 to $40,000 US. Wow. And what the Leica does is it allows you to advance with a blade. It's basically a little base plate extender, or it replaces the base plate, and it gives you this blade that you can advance film. And actually, I love using the Leica because it allows you, when you're shooting vertically, instead of, or even horizontally, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll take a photo with our film camera, we'll bring it down, advance it, and put it back up to our face.
Right.
Now the Leica nice because you can just stay here, fire, 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 fire. You don't. I don't know. For some, at least for me, anyways, I don't have that feeling of like wanting to take the camera down.
Right.
And Leica actually just reintroduced what they call the Leica M for their modern cameras, which is cool. So if you guys want to check that out, for your MAs, MPs, your M6 reissue, you can actually buy one again, which is pretty cool.
And a much more affordable option than trying to find an original one.
But that was something very unique to the M2.
So before we go to the third camera, we're looking at 3 and 2. How would you sort of differentiate the two for a customer, right? So if someone was looking at these solutions, they wanted a vintage film camera that didn't require a battery, Why would someone take the 3 over the 2 or the 2 over the 3?
I mean, it's pretty simple, really. It's that viewfinder magnification for me. Or I guess someone, the M3 is going to be a slightly more historical camera. You know, it's the first M, so maybe you buy it for that reason. But for me, it really comes down to, are you obsessed with 50 millimeter like I am? Then the M3, I mean, the M3 was my first M, so it also is sentimental to me in that way. But yeah, I think it really just comes down to the viewfinder. You know, I find Leica people are either, I'm a 35 shooter and I shoot 50 occasionally because I want a longer focal length, or I'm a 50 shooter and I shoot 35 occasionally. So that's really what it comes down to.
Gotcha.
You know, the 50 still works great on an M2, don't get me wrong. It's just a whole nother level in the M3. So that really is what it comes down to. Do you want to shoot wider than 50? You know, and you have to ask yourself, am I okay using, now there is one solution, it's called a lens with goggles, which we don't have here, which was kind of an optical solution to allow wider lenses on the M3. So remember, you can put a 18 millimeter on the M3. You can use it fine. It's just not through the rangefinder itself. You need an external viewfinder. So I don't want people to think if I buy an M3, I'm not able to use a wider lens, but it's just the convenience. And you know, some people like external viewfinders, especially like for street photography.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about, I mean, this is in your top 3. It's a very special camera to you. So we'll first talk about what this camera is, and then we'll walk through some of the customizations that you got done, because it is a special piece and in some ways a one of one, right? So which camera is this one right over here?
So I didn't want to just do vintage stuff. I mean, I wanted to do that. I mean, I guess.
Hold on, there's an emergency happening and we got to make sure that everyone's okay.
Yes. That New York life.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, so Jason's calling in the sirens, I think, because we're not here, because he's not here.
We're having too much fun without Jason. We're in his studio, and now he's just calling, swatting people right now all of a sudden, right? So tell us about this body.
So yes, I wanted to bring something like, these are maybe a little bit, obscure a little more, maybe intimidating to get into. This is an M7, which came out, I think, when did this come out? 2003, around when like the original MP, or the reissued MP came out.
It's a Gen Z.
Yeah, so this is a newer camera, but I didn't want it to just be vintage. I also wanted it to be underappreciated cameras, and I feel like the M7 is the most like misunderstood, underappreciated camera. And the reason is, this is the only film M with aperture priority.
Wow.
And that is pretty special, you know. It gets a bad rap because the camera does have an electronic shutter, meaning it's controlled with batteries. Now you do have, I believe, 60th and 125th, or 60th and 30th. There's 2 shutter speeds, I know, around 60th that you can use without a battery. So downside, you know, you're generally gonna want to keep some extra batteries with it. Another thing that I think is kind of not talked about enough with the M7 is how quiet the shutter is. By far, it's the most quiet film M shutter. It is like unbelievably quiet. So why don't you fire it? I mean, literally, the first time I bought actually this M7, I thought it was broken.
Now, here's the thing. As soon as you talk about quiet shutter in New York,
the horns
are gonna. All right.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter here, but yeah.
It's almost like you don't like. Did it actually?
Yeah. No, it's weird. I swear. The first time I fired this exact camera, I was like, is something wrong with this? Because I never owned an M7. It was very odd to me, you know? But then I was like, wow, that is like incredibly quiet, you know? It's just like, yeah, really cool.
Wow.
Another thing that's really special about the M7 is when you're shooting in aperture priority mode, it's the only film M that can go in between shutter speeds. So you're not set to just what basically your full stops or like, you know, half stop increments. It can pick, I think, up to like quarter stop. So the metering can be a bit more accurate with the M7, which is cool. Only in aperture priority mode, but another cool feature. But yeah, that's kind of like, it's pretty special. I mean, I really love the M7. I think, you know, they're discontinued now. When they first discontinued them, no one wanted them. And now the price has kind of crept back up a bit.
Yeah,
so they are, you know, for an M7, you're going to be paying roughly in the low to mid to high 3s, depending on condition. So you know, you're going to be approaching MP prices. So yeah, I mean the electronic function can be its downside, I guess, but it also gives you the upside of aperture priority and those intermediate shutter speeds and the really quiet shutter.
Right.
So that's why I think the M7 is, for an actual photographer.
Yeah.
You ask anybody that like has shot, maybe let's say back in the day, they're like, M7 is the best, you know.
Really?
Anybody that shoots an M7 loves it, myself included. I find myself with all these cameras, if I'm picking up to like do a serious shoot on film, maybe fashion, I want to be fast moving, it's going to be an M7.
Got it. Now, I got to bring up the elephant in the room because the M6 is often the most popular. It got the reissue.
For sure.
It's the one that sort of commands the most attention because, you know, a lot of people that don't want to invest in an MP, you know, the M6 is sort of like the one to go after. And it's been made popular in social media and all that kind of stuff. So why do you believe an M7, and you might be reiterating some of the same points, but why do you believe an M7 is a better investment than an M6?
Well, if we're talking about the older M6s, unless we're talking about a special edition, they have zinc top and bottom plates, which functionally doesn't really matter. But the M7, in my opinion, with the brass top and bottom plate, but what's more important is, especially, so these older cameras, they have like a lot of steel gears inside of them or brass gears inside. I think, to be honest with you, the original M6, although does it really matter? We don't see them breaking down that often. The materials inside of them are definitely a lower cost material. M4 II, M4, some of the M4Ps, but like the M4 II especially is a very like lower, and that's what they kind of say. The M6 is kind of like an M4 II with a light meter, which was, you know, the M4 II kind of helped save Leica at that time in the 70s, I believe, and the M6 as well, sold very well. But if you ask technicians and people that work on them, they much prefer M3, M2, M4, and then the modern cameras as well are built a little bit better inside. They use nicer materials.
Got it. Got it. So let's quickly go through what the estimated value would be. Actually, before we go into that, we almost forgot about something. You got some special work done on this. So you spent some time and some money to get some special work done on this one. Tell us a little bit about what you got. This is a favorite camera of yours. So what did you get done for this camera specifically? Because, you know, people are not going to be able to find this. They're looking at it, but they're not going to be able to find this.
I've posted a few photos here and there, but I haven't talked about this, you know, especially in a video. So this camera is special to me because of two reasons. Number one, the camera was originally silver. I purchased it in Milan, Italy. I was there on a trip with my girlfriend, and we went into the store, and at the time it was like, you know, the euro was very weak, or not weak, but it was about even with the dollar. So I got a great price on it, and it was the end of a really great trip that we had together. So the camera internals are very special. You know, it's something I'll keep forever because of that trip. Now, externally, what makes this specifically really special now is that it's in black paint, and they never made an M7 in black paint. You used to be able to do it through what Leica had was called the a la carte program, and they would kind of customize different things. But generally with a la carte, you would see, you know, leather changes, maybe a different engraving, because doing something like this would cost as much as the camera. And at the time, you know, to basically double the price of your camera to have it in black paint didn't really make sense. Well, nowadays, the black paint M7 a la cartes are actually the most valuable. They are the rarest of all a la cartes. Now, this didn't go through the a la carte program, but through some different kind of convincing and things, Leica was nice enough to actually completely remanufacture the external body for me, all in black paint, and a lot of special requests, even over most of the a la carte cameras you see. Now, number one, it's the strap lugs here. They're black painted brass, which normally we're going to see a silver lug on, even on the a la carte cameras. That was really rare. And then the little counter inside the window there is a black counter with white lettering, which is really special.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can show that on camera, but yeah, I mean,
you got to show this on camera, right?
It is,
I mean, that's something I noticed right away.
Some of the most valuable M3 of all time has a black counter. It's a very limited. I think there's maybe like 40 of them exist. You know,
right.
So that was a kind of a very special thing they did. And then, you know, it's just little things like the lens release is in black chrome, and I'm sorry, black paint, which is really special. Yeah, so I mean, they really did kind of a full customization. Another thing, normally M7s have a red dot. This is, I would say, it's kind of like an M7P. It has no red dot. It's got the what they call classic engraving on the top plate. Because normally, if you notice on like an MP, it will just say Leica, where this says Leica and then Leica Camera AG Germany.
Yeah, this is
really
this
special.
is the M7P Kevin edition.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
This is like
a Fickling original.
A holy grail modern M, I would say, for me.
That's
for sure.
Incredible. All right, so let's wrap this up on something that's going to give people value, but like the estimated price you'd spend to get a functional, well-usable product for each of these here.
Now, what I tell people when they buy an older camera, an older M, just factor in the cost of a CLA. Like, just expect it. Like, maybe it doesn't need it, but you know, you never know who you're buying from. Trust, you know. So that's the thing. Build a good relationship with a dealer. You know, there's many dealers. You know, find someone local to you that you kind of build a relationship you see in the community is trustworthy.
Right.
A CLA is going to be nowadays probably $350 on up, $350 to $500. On the older cameras, there's a few independent technicians that I would kind of go to rather than Leica, just because the wait is crazy right now.
Right.
I mean, I think the last time I was quoted like, pretty long for repair. So DAG camera, and there's a few other people that will do really nice CLAs on the older bodies. I wouldn't send maybe like an M7 and stuff. That would be more to Germany. But yeah, so I think for an M3, again, it depends on the finish. In silver, which is what you're going to find 99% of the time, you can, if you look hard enough, you can find one around $1,000.
Wow. Okay.
And then if you find one again with a rigid lens like this, around $2,000. Now that's going to take some digging.
Right.
Nowadays, I would say a good condition M3, you're going to be looking around $1,500 and up.
Got it. What about the M2?
M2, pretty similar, honestly. I would say in that like $1,400 to $2,000 range. So it's very similar to an M3, again in silver. Yeah.
And if you're looking for an M7?
M7, you're going to be starting around $3,000 and up. Yeah,
Got
$3,000 to $4,000 depending on condition. Basically, is what it kind of what will determine that.
Okay. Okay. I mean, this is all great information. I think after talking to you today, having an M6 of my own, looking at this collection here, if I were to add another film camera, I gotta say, I think the M3 is probably the one I'm looking at.
I tell people the M3 is a great second film body. If you're locked into 50. Do the M3,
yeah, like
but otherwise,
50 on this, keep it on this, and keep a 35 or 28 on the
If
other.
I could just glue that rigid on there and make it an MQ, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a lot of people. It's like, oh, I bought a new MP. That's another thing. You buy a new MP, or even if you have an M7, something with a little more tech. You have a light meter in it, or maybe aperture priority. Okay, do the M3. It's more limiting. If you got to use that viewfinder for a wider lens, it's great with the 50.
Right.
So that's kind of like an M3, and then something newer is a great combination.
Awesome, man. Look, I enjoyed this conversation. I always learn a lot every time we have these conversations. I think for this video, let's leave it to the audience. Why don't you tell us what conversations you want to see more of? Because every time we meet up, we end up making 2 or 3 of these videos
I know.
on both of our channels, right? And we enjoy talking about it. So for this one, for those of you that made it here, please let us know in the comments what kind of conversations you want to see. What do you want to see us dive into?
We're just scratching the surface with this stuff. So there's a lot more we can get into.
There's
but
100 years of Leica.
This is cool that we're just
talk about.
It's like, let's start out. Let's kind of do things that are easily accessible. People can get into, not spend a fortune on, and kind of enjoy.
Yeah, and our cameraman's getting tired right now holding that camera handheld. So let's wrap
Hands
it
are
up
shaking.
here.
It's okay.
Kevin, thank you so much.
That was awesome.
And looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.